Well, Freddie, we've spent a fair amount of time together now, but Adam, for your information, I'm Tracy Lee. I'm the founder of TLEE Spas. I've been in the spa business now for 30 plus years. And Michael is our COO. So Michael, you want to?
Sure. So after a successful stalking campaign in the 90s, I got to work with Tracy, and we started really collaborating together in 2010. And fast forward to 2019 when I came on as COO. So it's been an incredible ride with incredible projects. And it's interesting that music has always been front of mind for us in the spa experience. And really trying to put forth, more than just the sort of canned, predictable, 3 preset stations with various new age channels. And, it's something that I was also really inspired by Tracy because she is such a music aficionado, going to festivals and performances. And so it's really exciting based on the collaborations that we're doing on certain projects, but also that this topic has become so front and center to kind of the broader wellness movement. So I'm excited to be a part of this conversation and really really grateful for your participation. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like in our business, there's been some periods of time when there's kind of large scale shifts or movements. And, for example, in the 90s when spas were referred to as fat farms, and then all of a sudden it shifted to kind of more mind body wellness environments. And, that was really exciting to me. It was exciting to me when they became less about, as people say, scrubs and rubs and being it for, pampering palaces for the rich. And it became more about, focusing on mental health and that kind of thing. And I feel like right now, this trend, if you will, or this movement with bringing music for its therapeutic value into spas. I mean, I feel like this is a big disruptor. This is another major shift that's happening in our business. And because it's, I'm personally so interested in it, it's kind of reignited. I mean, 30 years later, reignited my passion for this business. So thrilled to be here with you today and having this conversation. So tell us about how the two of you met.
Yeah.
The meet cute story. Oh gosh. I think similarly to you, Michael, I did a little bit of a stalking session.
Good.
Professor Ockelford has spent, just obviously I'll let you introduce yourself, Adam, but he's written a lot of amazing literature on the use of music, and particularly in high impact environments. And there was a specific podcast that I stumbled across when I was researching autistic communities, how music was being utilized. And everything he said really resonated with me, from the general principles of the use case to the overall ambition and vision for how music could be seen in the future. Literally everything. And so we shared it around all of our team here. Everyone listened to it, and we were like, God, it would be great if we could figure out how to speak to Adam. And so I just LinkedIn stalked him, found him, and then persistently messaged him until he allowed me to come visit him at his studio, where he, being typical him, I say persistently, he just welcomed me in and invited me to come watch actually Derek play at the piano with a girl, Romy, who is also autistic. But no, so essentially I went into the studio and I saw Adam kind of just introduced me in a baptism by fire kind of way to literally music being performed and spoken back and forth between these two individuals. Derek being immensely talented, completely blind with severe learning difficulties on the spectrum, and Romy also being for the most part nonverbal, but yet the joy between the two of them was sort of almost effusive, and it was all music related. And for me, it was probably one of the most eye-opening experiences that I've ever had. I love music as a personal fan, but I've never experienced music like that. I never will again, to be honest. And I've managed to be in the audience when Derek plays a few times now. So, that was just a really special moment. So from there, I continued to stalk him and regularly go and sort of see him, and we got the incredible opportunity to come to Tel Aviv together and perform at the Global Wellness Summit, and we went and spoke at a couple of other interesting places like the Weizmann Institute, to their neuroscience department, and then to the Belev Echad, which is a house for IDF veterans who are suffering with post-traumatic stress, and it was just kind of like a play along. And then eventually I stalked him out to Boston, which that was actually proper stalking. I kind of just followed him to something he was doing and kind of sort of watched along. But that's the story from my perspective. I'm sure you're going to get a much more sort of you kind of Netflix series interpretation from Adam now as he tells you about my crazed antics to get into the room with him.
Freddie, before we move on to Adam, do you just want to give like a quick introduction to you and Myndstream, and then we can do the same with Adam?
That'll probably be helpful. Yes. Brilliant. So I'm Freddie Moross, and I run a business called Myndstream, and we do music for health and well-being settings. Essentially, we are a small part of a much larger organization called Cutting Edge Group, who essentially are the largest independent provider of music for all forms of media, film, TV, advertising, gaming, about 150 soundtracks a year, all sorts of different things. Essentially, they've made a very good career out of being able to create magic moments with music on screen. And the business that we're in now and with that Myndstream's in is trying to figure out how to translate those magical experiences into literally into experiences, things that you can have in physical environments. And I suppose the main thing that I'm always involved with, and the reason why I'm excited to be working with the likes of Tracy and Michael and everything we're doing with TLEE is when audio is being utilized, as it often is, not just for entertainment purposes, but with a specific utility and trying to elicit a certain reaction or outcome, that's where Myndstream really comes into play, because we understand art, we understand entertainment, we do it well on the media side, and we do it well in our core catalog business on the well-being side. But we believe that we shouldn't, in this particular field, just operate as a label normally does. It's not just about competing for playlist spots. It's not just about, publishing the next best artist. There's an obligation out there because of how the music's being used, in order to ensure that we're being responsible and taking the right advice from the relevant experts, to become better, to ensure that it goes through a level of quality controls, to ensure that we're conducting and undertaking research. And I have to be very upfront with this. We're right at the beginning of that journey, and we will always probably be at the beginning of that journey, because the thing that I'm beginning to discover is that research is a very much a never-ending loop, which is wonderful. But I think the reason why we've ended up having the modest success that we've had in terms of entering this market and being welcomed into the market is because we entered a market, the world of spa, which just seemed to have its arms open, ready for something to disrupt them, particularly something which is so evocative and involves the senses, and audio being an incredible sense at setting the environment, and us being someone who wants to put the intentional design and the care into ensuring that sense is curated with the same level of intention that a movie soundtrack is. It seems that stars begin to align, and thankfully I happen to have a network of the likes of people like Adam on the call, who really are people I can defer to help us in that journey of ensuring that we are responsible as we go forward. So that's my lovely little segue to you, Adam, to introduce yourself.
Right, thanks, Freddie. So my background is as a classical musician. I was trained at a conservatoire in London at the Royal Academy of Music 40 years ago. And I guess my first encounter with music was as art. Music was something to be revered, to kind of put on a pedestal, and you worked incredibly hard to produce these perfect performances. Clearly they could never be perfect, but you're always striving after this ideal. While I was at music college in London, I started volunteering at a school for the blind down in southwest London, and I'm actually still volunteering there now, and that's 45 years ago, so it must have had some impact, I think. But the extraordinary thing was what I found in the children who couldn't see was this just intuitive grasp of music as a language. I think they breathed music, they could improvise music, they could play instruments without needing notes on paper. It was all done in the moment, and it was just joy, really, compared with music college, which can be a drudgery of scales and arpeggios and 6 hours practice a day. And these children could do things that I couldn't do. They could sit down and play any TV theme tune, and they could play it in any key as well. And they could improvise around it, and they could jazz it up. And so I thought, gosh, what are they doing so right that isn't part of my music education? And I suppose that started a long journey into music psychology, into trying to figure out how the brain processes music, how it responds to music, and why music has such a powerful impact on us. And I guess over the 40 years, I've moved from seeing music primarily as an elite art form that a few people do and many people are consumers of, to something that's actually integral to the way that we as humans have always existed and will continue to do so. So music, the anthropologists say now that music began probably about 500,000 years ago as a form of social bonding through things like dancing and stomping and whooping and yelling, pre-language. So language probably came about 200,000 years ago. So music really is the most fundamental, the most ancient form of human communication in sound. And the reason humans did it was not as some sort of abstract thing, but it was because when you make sounds, when you perceive sounds, hormones are released in the brain. It has an emotional impact. And if a group of people hear the same music at the same time and make the same music at the same time, then they'll feel the same emotion at the same time, and they'll have this sense of group bonding. And it's actually that capacity to bring humans together, both as within social groups, but also the maternal baby bonding as well, through babbling, through what's called motherese nowadays. And so I came to see music primarily as a form of part of the human condition, if you like, of emotional regulation, of well-being, for sure, of human communication, of friendship, of socialization. And that, I think, is the primary purpose of music. So in a way, what we're doing with Freddie and with Music for Spas and so on is, in a way, it's kind of getting back to the first purpose of music, which was to regulate emotions and to feel together as a group of people sharing a common experience. And to me, that's what makes this sort of project and this work really exciting.
I was just saying, when I think about the environments that we create in spas and people that work in spas and wellness environments in general, we always pride ourselves in creating sensory journeys, and that's taste and touch and what you're looking at and smell in particular. But there's been such a void with sound and creating memories around sound and music. So, tell me, and we're all, I think, in the business guilty of it, really. I mean, there's kind of a one size fits all. Everyone assumes that, like, okay, when you walk into a spa, you're hearing nature sounds or you're hearing new age music, and there's just,
or you're hearing quiet meditative soundscapes, like by default, right?
So I think really presumptuous of those of us in the business to think that it's a one size fits all. And so, tell us a little bit about what Myndstream is doing to help shift that in spas and making it creating an opportunity for those of us that are consulting and developing and designing spa environments.
Sure. I think you've hit the nail on the head in terms of laying out what the opportunity is. I think, spa has done it fantastically well with the other senses. I think the power of audio is something that everyone I think everyone can be educated by. We as I lay out the top, we're still learning. We've been in the music business for 20 odd years now. We still don't truly understand the full potential of audio. That's why we need to work on these sort of research projects and get to understand it a little bit better. But one thing's for sure, and in the work we're doing at the moment, and certainly as we start working together, there is, with the right level of intentional design behind the soundtracks to the spas, you can create a lot of value. But but without me going into the commercial side of why Myndstream do what they do, I'd much rather, we've got Adam on the call. I mean, Adam, you and I have spoken before about memory and why music has got this this power. I wonder whether or not it's better, instead of me talking about Myndstream, I just pass it to you and you talk a little bit about the background to why music creates these emphatic moments.
Sure, yeah. So music affects people really for two different reasons. One is the quality of the sounds themselves. And it seems that the basic psychological sort of responses that people make to different qualities of sound are fairly universal. In fact, they are universal. So music psychology began almost 100 years ago as a science. And the first thing people tried to figure out was, why are there certain sounds that cause particular emotional responses? And there are, it seems, pretty universal responses to certain sorts of sound. For example, quiet, low sounds will tend to emotionally dampen our psyche. High, loud, quick sounds will tend to stimulate the brain, almost like adrenaline, and speed us up. And there's in between that, there's 100 different states, of course. And some emotional and states are culturally informed. So we learn from being in a particular culture that certain harmonies, for example, like major chords and minor chords, have certain connotations that we learn through exposure. So, for example, like Freddie, you were saying about music for movies and games and so on. Well, a lot of those use particular tropes. So they, a suspense sound has been used since the silent movies time. It's a diminished seventh chord. In fact, my great uncle was a pianist in the silent movies, and he knew they had certain figurations of harmonies and notes and melodies they knew would cause particular effects, and they were constantly being reinforced, because every time people went to see a movie, the chase scene always had certain movements, and the romance scene always had certain chords, basically borrowed from Wagner, actually. So these things go back into musical history. So there's that's the first kind of response to sound, is something that's kind of hardwired, and it happens very quickly. When we hear a sound, we emotionally respond in about a fifth of a second. Before we're cognitively aware, before we're consciously aware of a response, we've already made an emotional response. And that harks right back to our basic fight or flight, as a animal, never mind a human being, because we needed to respond very fast to a sound if it was threatening. In particular, we had to respond quickly because our survival might depend upon running away. Equally, if it were, the sound of something that was good to eat, we needed to know that fairly fast. So these things are pre-conscious. Then on top of that, as human beings, we overlay, as you were saying, Freddie, memories. And so whenever we hear a particular piece of music in a particular context, and that might be in a pleasant context, like in a spa, for example, then the next time we hear that music, the whole memory comes back with the music. So in other words, the music can act as a trigger for other memories. So if we have a pleasant experience associated with a particular piece of music, the music alone is enough to bring back that whole emotional circle, if you like, of other effects. It'll bring back to mind the scents, the aromas, the tactile qualities. And I think it's because music, that's why music's so effective in film, for example, in movies, because unlike language, which is quite specific, music is quite abstract, and we can freely associate with it in a way that we can't with words. So if you're listening to a story, the story works because it's triggering particular memories. The way music works is as an abstract narrative, and we can associate our own feelings and thoughts and memories with it. And so because we're the same species, there's a universal aspect to music. We respond in a similar way to similar kinds of sound, but there's also an intensely personal aspect that is built up of our own memories and associations. And that's a double thing, why music's so effective in creating well-being. But it's also the challenge, because we need to think perhaps in the same way that pharmacology is thinking, of individual prescriptions. We need to think about individuals and how they respond to music, rather than thinking one pill fits all. You know, here's the headache pill. It's not like that. And we know now that drugs work, you know, that we're moving towards having individualized therapies, aren't we? And I think we've been talking to Freddie about this. We need to think going forward about how to create individualized programs for people that will have the most powerful effect for them.
Just picking up on that as well, because there's a couple of things that I think, you know, as easy wins that you can apply to the spa industry just simply. I mean, what Adam's saying about, you know, in the first instance, with these different tropes which are consistent to particular modes, modalities, feelings, and so on and so forth. The idea, you know, when we look at how the spas operate at the moment, if you just look simply at, you know, location of a spa or the cultural influences of a particular spa, the differences between Western music and Eastern music, for instance, at a very sort of base level, are so drastic, even in the harmonies and the number of notes that sit in between those harmonies, the whole setup of the music itself. So the concept of, let's say you do everything right and you're based in the US, and you want to hark back to a particular type of you know, ancient Eastern traditions, but you're using, I don't know, not to slight on any musician, but you're using Enya, you know, classical Western New Age piece of music. Why? I mean, there's no sense to it, because you have to, you know, you're losing out on so many emotional aspects to the type of music that conjures up, you know, authentic emotion in those particular cultures. So as a simple, easy win, and this is very much not a Myndstream plug, because you can fix this one on your own. But if you're, you know, if you have certain cultural references, you can use music which is, you know, of that type and style and have a greater impact. But, you know, picking up on what Adam's saying a little bit further in terms of, you know, memory and the ability to tag moments and feelings to music and relive them when listening to that music at a later date. I mean, what an incredible tool. If you're able to take away a specific soundtrack that is specific to a location and then give that to someone after they experience it on site, so that they will forever think of that particular treatment, that environment, when they listen to that playlist, what an opportunity for an industry which is all about creating memories and experiences. So
all about taking the experience home with you. But we think about it in terms of buying a candle or bringing home the bath salts. You know, this is like something that this is something that you've heard. It's now imprinted and it's related to this incredible experience that you've had at a place, and you don't need to buy anything, right?
It's value add, right? It's not an upcharge.
Really,
it's all non-conscious. So as with movie music, when you come to the end of a movie, apart from the title track or whatever, you've no memory of it consciously.
Yeah.
And yet you'd only have to play some of the key motifs. Just think of any of the John Williams scores, for example, and they bring you straight back.
Yeah.
Or how about Jaws?
It's because Jaws, well, absolutely, and so it's that. I could imagine people going for a spa session and having, in the future, having a personalized a playlist for them, and then taking that back, that would at once both evoke their experience with you, but also be personal to them. And I think that will be uniquely powerful.
I have a question about that personalization. How would you suggest, you know, that you know, if the technology and the systems allow for that, what sort of questions or information do you need from a particular guest or person in order to truly meaningfully, you know, make that customized soundtrack? I mean, is it purely like preference? Is it you know, I'm just curious how that would work.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. I do a lot of work with people with dementia, older people, and there's even when they can't speak, so we have to do I'm coming on to the easy bit, which is to ask people what they like. I'm assuming we haven't got that option. And so there's this thing called the critical period, which you may know about. So from the age of about mid-teens to early 20s is the time when our hormones are racing around most strongly. And at that point, any music we hear becomes the most strongly emotionally tagged we ever have. And so the way I work with people with dementia is to, first of all, figure out what age they are in a polite way. And then what cultural background they come from, and what are their broad cultural preferences and landing points, if you like. And then you can have a fair old, you know, pretty accurate idea of the kind of thing they might like. Now you've got to overlay that with, in the case of people with dementia who can't say, with the relative saying, actually, on their wedding day, they had this particular piece of music, or I know that this particular music has a special association. So you can have you can focus in. First of all, you can get 50 pieces that you're pretty sure will be hit the right mark. But then on top of that, you've always got to have room for idiosyncrasies as well. But clearly in someone in, say, middle age, you can have a fair guess from those pretty basic questions of age, cultural background, sort of broad interests, and then ask them on top of that to think of particular experiences that evoke particularly pleasant emotions, a bit like cognitive behavioral therapy in a way. You know, you're asking, think of the sort of music that makes you happy, and then you can, of course, through the algorithms that exist, you can then move sideways. So if you like, I don't know, a particular piece, for the sake of argument, sung by Frank Sinatra, for example, you could then quite easily find similar styles of music by Frank Sinatra. I think then you need an evaluation loop. So you need to get people to, and you can do this just technologically through things they play most often when you offer them stuff. Or of course you could ask them to rate pieces as they come by and gradually refine the playlist. The other thing is that it evolves over time. We change over time as well, and it's really important to keep these things alive. And also, just from in the same way that people would come to you for a similar experience, I guess they wouldn't want exactly the same thing each time. They'd want something more and new and innovative, as well as the things they're familiar with. And I think that the thing with music is that we know that a certain level of exposure, it brings great pleasure. But if you go beyond that, it can lead to boredom, you know, being tired of things. So we need to titrate the dose of music quite carefully and keep slipping in new things that are quite affined to what's already known to be, to evoke pleasurable experiences.
Adam's,
but a lot of that, some of that can be done through software, and some of it needs the human contact, I think. Sorry, Freddie.
I was just going to say, Adam's special ability that he does at dinner parties is he can go around the table and tell you exactly who your favorite artist was from back when you were a child. He got.
We might have to do this before the end of this interview. I'm sorry, but we might have to have that interview. We might have to have that. I had a quick question. You know, your background, Adam, is through live music, you know, instrumentation. Is there any substantial difference between that form of music and sound versus pre-recorded mechanical? I mean, I know just from my own experience, we elicit a lot of emotions through speakers and through kind of, you know, technological sound installations, but I'm sure there must be some difference, or I assume there would be, between live music, you know, and pre-recorded.
Yeah, actually, funnily enough, it's not as clear cut as you might think. People have done experiments and found that recorded music does the job as well. But if you want the very strong experiences in music to set the memories off, it's better. I would always recommend having a mixture of live musicians as well. And then if you have recordings of the live musicians, you then get a more powerful subsequent effect. In other words, you know, say you go to a concert and hear your favorite artist sing your favorite song, you then get a recording, don't you? And that particular recording will bring back the whole multi-sensory, multimodal impact. And in a way, music is more than just sound. It is a visual thing. It's a vibroacoustic thing. And it's a movement thing. We all move to music and see people moving to music. And also, by experiencing music at the same time as other people, we do have that sense of a group emotion. So actually having within a spa, perhaps live performances with groups of people, I think would add immeasurably. And then go to the recordings of that, maybe video recordings as well, not just audio recordings. I'm working with people with dementia at the moment, and they prefer to see us performing in video rather than just audio, because it's a stronger memory.
Yeah, I want to just draw it back as well, because I know this is in specific celebration of World Music Therapy Day, and I want to draw attention to one of the great things that music therapists are able to do is often they do their practice one-to-one, and they personalize their treatments specifically based on the reactions. So when you speak to a music therapist, one of the most important skills of a music therapist, and these are clinically trained medical professionals who deliver music in therapeutic environments, and it's very specialist, and it's an incredible piece of work. But when they're delivering this work, they're able to monitor and assess and then adapt their delivery mechanism in order to ensure that it fits the patient that they're delivering it to. So, for instance, one of the music therapists I was speaking to recently, who delivers to inpatient care in hospitals in the US, she likes to get these patients to dance with her. And as Adam says, movement is such an incredible tool, but she'll experience that over the session, the patient may slow down, they may fatigue, and she'll adjust the tempo that she plays at to fit so that they can still enjoy the experience, but it very much is at the patient's pace. And one of the beauties about live music is it's personalized, and that's the thing, particularly on a one-to-one musical interaction. Whereas what we're doing, which isn't music therapy, it's the use of therapeutic music in therapeutic environments. And whilst we're looking to deliver a certain robustness and quality, you're never going to replace that level of one-to-one service and one-to-one experiential value. And you'd never want to, in my opinion. I think you'd want to try and act as a service for the other aspects of the spectrum that can't be serviced. Because the thing about that music therapy is there are 10,000 music therapists in total across America right now. They can't service everything. They can't. And so they need reliable partners who can help make sure that the benefits of music are widely accessible, and then they can focus on the high impact areas, which is what they do very, very well.
Adam, I think we're getting to the point where you might need to leave us, but in general, I suppose like sound, from what I've seen kind of across not just the wellness industry, but across all sectors, seems to be becoming more something that people are focusing on. People want like a robust audio experience. And I just wondered if you've seen that, and if so, why you think that is.
Yes, it's quite tricky. I mean, there used to be this thing called Muzak in lifts, didn't they? And people realized, and people realized quite quickly. I had a colleague called Professor David Hargreaves, who did a lot of work in the 90s about music in retail. And they discovered that actually what really influences buying behavior is authentic music, as you were saying, Freddie, and music that is associated with the things you're trying to persuade people to sell. And I think that's the crucial thing, is we move away from sort of canned, sort of anodyne music that suits everyone and really suits no one, to more targeted interventions. I must go because I'm supposed to be on the radio.
That could have been part of our interview. That could have been kind of cool.
That could be great. Get a radio spot on.
Yeah.
He's great.
Freddie, if you still have time, it'd be nice to kind of cover off some of the work you've been doing, I suppose, with us. And I know you have started to be a board member for the Global Wellness Institute. And I suppose it'd be interesting to know, again, from all of you guys, just the evolution that you've seen and the kind of excitement and trends potentially we're going to see going forward.
Yeah, and Freddie, you should start with talking about the award that you won this year too.
Congratulations!
Oh, God, that's not. This is not how you start off a British person speaking. I'm already shivering.
Shucks.
No, look, I've said it a few times at this point, because I really do mean it. This particular industry of people, I mean, it's unique. It's more of a community than an industry. We go to these things, and I've gone to a few of them now, different types, different places, from Israel to Vegas to, from spa specific to wellness specific. But you see familiar faces who are titans of this industry, and they've grown up and built this thing together. And there is a close-knit group of incredible minds who not only can stand on the testament of each other and what they've built, but also have this incredible warmth and hospitality to accept new ideas. And I think that is truly unique to this particular industry. I've not been around the block too long, but I certainly haven't seen it elsewhere. And so what I always think is interesting, and be it an innovation into, you know, from touch therapy through to how to, you know, deal with labor shortages, through to, you know, what's the next thing around the corner. You know, what I've been inspired by in all these conversations is everyone is always talking positively about how can we improve experiences for the guests, and that always seems to be the absolute pinnacle of every conversation. It's always very much right in the mind. We need to make sure we take care of the guests, whoever they are, wherever they are, whatever they're experiencing. They're giving them the best they can offer, and we've got to take care of the therapists who are delivering those experiences to the guests to make sure there's longevity in those experiences. And you know, when we talk about what the trends are next, and you know, coming out of the Global Wellness Summit, and yes, you mentioned I'm now on the advisory board to the Global Wellness Institute. You know, I think what's consistent in these trends as we go across the field is this idea of multi-sensory immersion is something which I fully buy into. I think a lot of people I speak with also seem to understand that, you know, it just makes sense logically, that is something we should adopt more. And certainly as you know, new and great innovations have started to make their way into spa, I think people are beginning to realize that actually there's no substitute for really memorable, authentic, great experiences, and they can be simple. They can be really simple. You're just as good as just having like a really well thought through aromatherapy scent routine coupled with the perfect soundtrack. That can be very memorable and not very expensive to provide. And so when you start having innovations which aren't, you know, crazy sort of, oh god, we're on a spaceship to Mars type sort of looking things, which are also really cool, to be fair, it gets quite exciting because they become really, really easy to adopt, and then very accessible to deliver. And that opens up wellness to a whole host of new people. So for me, I couldn't be more excited about this industry at this moment in time. I think it is genuinely it's from a macro level, during the current environment where we're going into a you know, and have been for a while now, a crunch in terms of people's propensity to spend, and you know, the available wealth that people have, and the questions of, okay, well, you know, as you were mentioning earlier, Tracy, spa, you know, is that luxury? Are we still going to be able to afford retreats? Are we going to do, you know, is that what people are going to spend on? Well, you know, it's interesting. I think there's never been more of a time where people have wanted to spend on things that are going to genuinely make them feel healthier, happier, better, live longer, you know, all of these sort of things. And people's focuses have shifted. You know, they don't see spa anymore as just kind of this luxury retreat space. You know, they see it as you know, for what it is, which is you know, some spas even are, you know, med centers now with preventative healthcare tools, which are incredibly well thought through and valuable. So my very rambled response to your very much more succinct question is, I think in a general trend setting, I think you're going to see a significant increase in the demand for accessible wellness. I think you are seeing an industry that is adopting a lot of interesting and easy to implement trends. I am extremely excited, since I'm an audio guy. I love music and I love everything it stands for. I'm extremely excited by the conversations I've had with, you know, some of the most incredibly successful people in this industry, who are so ready and you know, they're ready to adopt audio and see what it can do, and feel the potential and partner with it. That's the exciting thing for me. It's like, it just feels like a massive collaboration opportunity, just to see how far we can push, you know, a sense which hasn't really been used all that much before. So it feels like a step change innovation in the industry, and I'm very excited for it.
Yeah, it's great.
I didn't even have to mention the awards. See, look at that, Tracy.
Yeah.
Nice dodge.
We're gonna make you do that. But you know, I think back to, this is just a personal story that I think, you know, I feel like I've come full circle now sitting here with all of you today. But this goes back to when I was a spa receptionist at a place in Colorado in the 90s. So gosh, I think it was like probably 28 years ago about now. And I was sitting in a ballroom with about 200 other employees, ranging from busboys to the general manager. And they were doing a renovation on this hotel and this spa. And this interior designer, really spiritual, interesting guy from Santa Fe, he did a slideshow. And this is the 90s, right? He was showing sofas and paint colors and tiles. Like it was like I mean, I don't even know if it was a PDF. It was, I mean, it could have been just actually a slideshow, you know, and he was playing Sting's Fields of Gold. And I'll never, every single time I hear that song, like I almost feel like it kind of brings tears to my eyes now almost. And it was a simple interior design presentation. But I remember who was sitting next to me. I remember looking outside and seeing the sun reflecting off the snow. I remember it just brings me right back. And that song is just like means so much to me. And I feel like in some ways it almost like influenced my desire to stay in this business and maybe get on a little bit more onto the design side rather than just the operation side. And, you know, it's just, to me, that's just a personal story about what, you know, a song did for me. And it's just, so I do not underestimate the power of what you're doing in our environment. So, you know, thank you for working with us, and we're really excited to turn this into something and create even bigger opportunities. And like you said, you know, what we have in mind is always the end user experience and making lives better for people.
And the details, right? And I think I really take from Freddie, we often talk about that, you know, that the kind of magic lies somewhere between these big ideas and kind of new and the finer details, and that, you know, really setting the overall experience to enable people to, you know, to have, you know, a profound change for however long they, you know, whether it's, you know, just for the spa experience or beyond. You know, that music is such an important aspect, and it's really accessible to us. And it's like, it's just such an opportunity that really every spa facility up and down the food chain and locationally can really embrace. So, you know, that's exciting too, how kind of universal this opportunity is as well.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that story, Tracy, as well. That's great. I'm gonna remember that one. I'm gonna remember that next time I'm playing Sting. You're thinking about the slides.
Okay, so the award, tell us about that before we wrap.
So I was very much honored to receive the Deborah Simon Award from the GWI and GWS for leader in furthering mental wellness in 2022, which was great. I mean, you know, I again, I don't believe we collectively, Myndstream, we've not done anything yet. That's the thing. So for me, I say it facetiously, that our team have done an incredible job building a great consumer-facing music catalog, and we have a lot of streams, and you know, it's going really well. But you know, I measure our success really, and we measure it both in terms of, you know, profit. Of course, we're a for-profit business, but also in purpose and impact. And you know, because our music is being consumed so much as a utility, specifically to try and improve and elicit certain health outcomes, I'm measuring our success about really being a valued partner to some of these areas who are delivering those health outcomes. So going into spas, delivering these treatments, becoming the soundtracks to a lot of these different places and becoming prevalent. So when I say facetiously, oh, we haven't done anything yet, it's because, you know, receiving that award in November was incredible. But we've launched our first product as of this month. So, you know, the reason why it was such an unbelievable moment for me personally, and it kind of just, it almost felt like a statement from the industry as a whole, you know, being like, we love the concept, we buy into the vision, we're ready, you know, we're ready for audio to come in and be sort of something we're going to really sort of put home and talk about properly. And I mean, what an incredible shared collaborative vision, you know, for the industry as a whole. And that kind of what that award meant to me. And, you know, from a personal point of view, I didn't expect it at all. My dad was sitting next to me, who was in on it. And it was one of the most special moments in my life, seeing him sort of tear up and be very, very proud. I kept nudging him, thinking he was meant to go up and collect it himself until they said son of, I was like, it's me. I see. So I had to scramble some thank yous and try and figure out how to say words. But no, it was a very special moment. But you know, this is why it's you know, I'm so privileged to be in part of this industry. It's a lot of very warm people who are extremely welcoming, and I believe that award wasn't really an award of things that have happened, but a sign of things to come. And that's why I was so excited by it.
That's great. Beautiful.
Yeah, and besides, you have a magnetic personality, so there you go.
God, you really are going to try and make me blush this call, aren't you? This isn't what I.
I barely met you, but you like made an impact and on my first ever global wellness. I mean, I just saw you and that performance where you brought on that kind of chamber music ensemble. I mean, same to what Tracy said. It was, and the joy that they were feeling together and what they imparted to that room was major.
Yeah, that was
great.
Yeah, Ashley, that was in 2021 in Boston. And, you know, Freddie brought a group into, you know, again, it was a room, it was a ballroom filled with 500 to 700 people of like, you know, people that were post lunch, having listened to speakers all day long, kind of sleepy, ready to get on with their day. And Freddie brings in this group, and it was like, you know, everyone was just brought to their feet. It was just like, all of a sudden everybody was like, and it was like, again,
the energy is like crush of energy, positive energy. Yeah.
You know, it's like,
yeah, that sounds incredible.
I was speaking to the quartet about that just after their performance, because so essentially the people we brought in were a quartet from who we worked with a little bit before, but they're all Berklee College musicians. So, you know, just starting off in their careers, they're all phenomenally talented. And they've done very well already, you know, being very young, but they've already kind of excelled in a whole variety of things. But we did the music to Bridgerton, which is kind of how we got the idea to doing it. What we did there was we did sort of like quartet classical arrangements of popular songs. So take Ariana Grande and put it into a quartet arrangement. Yeah, it worked really well, and it kind of fit the vibe. But you know, what I found really interesting is that quite a lot of quartets do this quite regularly in like wedding environments or something like that, where it's kind of meant to be a passive background thing. And I know this quartet specifically, they have played, they're not really a wedding quartet, but they have played event halls before, where, you know, the purpose wasn't to listen to the music, but it was there in the background. And, you know, after the conversation, because they didn't, you know, they didn't have much time to rehearse, so they kind of put together a little bit on the fly. So I kind of saw them beforehand, and they came in and they just performed the way they did, and they did like a medley of Moon River into Somewhere Over the Rainbow with a bit of classical thrown in there as well. So it kind of went, you know, through a few different phases from classical music into film score. They're very popular, and then finished it off with Somewhere Over the Rainbow, which is, you know, obviously a smash song, which everyone knows. And the reaction they got was just unbelievable. I mean, the audience kind of stood up, and certain people had, you know, tears in their eyes and were really welling up, and it was just super emotional. And the whole room just felt charged. It was an incredible expression. And I went out into the green room, as it were, afterwards, and spoke to them. I was like, oh, do you guys get that often? And they were like, that was nuts. I have no idea what just happened. We played medleys like this when it's been kind of passive before, and people walk by and they're doing their things, they're having their chats or drinking a glass of wine, their attention's elsewhere. And, you know, that kind of reaffirmed everything we've been speaking about, because the reason, in my belief and in discussion, that they thought as well, and we've been workshopping these ideas before since, and seeing how we could do that, not just with live, but recorded as well, is the beauty in that was prior to the quartet starting to play, I spent 15 minutes essentially just saying, music is the most amazing, powerful thing in the world. You listen to attention, it's going to make you blow your mind. And, you know, I just built it up. But it's in the packaging. If you are allowing someone to listen, and it's the same thing with breathing as well. If you draw attention to it and you do breath work in a structured, intentional environment, it has an impact. It has a difference. But if you just are there not paying attention to your breathing, you'll go about your day, and there's going to be no specific value. The same thing can be said for audio. If you package it correctly, and I'm not talking about, you know, branding it and, you know, throwing it up on the shelves. I'm talking about just allowing people to understand the intention behind the design, why it's been put together in a certain way, and invite them to listen to it in a way that could make a difference to them emotionally. All of a sudden, you change the perspective on it just being art and becoming a tool that evokes emotion. And of course, you'll have moments regardless where you'll listen to Sting during a slideshow and it will have that memory and it will have that emotional impact anyway. But it increases the likelihood it will really work. And, you know, that moment in Boston was a really reaffirming one, because it kind of, we proved it in the room as we were talking about what we wanted to prove, which was awesome, because it was a special moment. It was awesome. It was really cool.
Yeah. Very memorable for sure. You know, of all the speakers and all the days and all the minutes and hours, I mean, in my mind, you know, that's the one that was most memorable to me. And I'm sure it's because of you, but I think it's the power of music, right?
It's the power of music. I
It's
could say it very, very, very convincingly here. Music helps, and you know, same thing in Tel Aviv. There's a reason why whenever I speak, I try to bring a musician on stage, and it's you know, we're going on.
There's a lot of heavy lift, right?
Exactly. It makes it much easier standing on shoulders, I must say. But you know, there's a reason why people came up after the Tel Aviv performance and spoke about Derek. You know, it's because they music is memorable. It just is. And when you have something which is unique, particularly in a conference environment, when there's a lot of very impressive people speaking about some extremely interesting stuff, you know, thought leaders across the space, which is all very relevant to the businesses that people are, you know, are going there to do. So it's very interesting stuff. You have to do something which is going to be, you know, break the mold a little bit. And, you know, music helps break that mold, in my opinion. And certainly, I think I probably will continue leveraging that little calling card with music in the next Global Wellness Conference.
Yeah, it's a good lesson for us too, right, Michael? It's like,
yes.
maybe we
emotional palate cleanser, right?
Yeah. I would encourage anyone who is interested in the history of music and why it's impactful. I mean, one of the things that Adam and I are working on together is really sort of putting it together in a way which is really easy to digest for spa therapists specifically. So use of that in spa environments. But he's written quite a few books and a lot of literature. So that one of the books, particularly called Comparing Notes, I find personally very interesting. It goes through the history of musicology. It is a little bit in detail, both on the music side and also on the history. But if you wanted to get involved in that and read it, and you're interested in what he has studied, he lays it out really well in that book. And hopefully very soon it will be in a very easy to digest manner, specifically with the intention for spa therapists going forward, because we think it's very
spa
important.
Consultants, we need to learn more.
And spa consultants. Well, yes. I think it's super important that anyone who's handling audio and using it as part of their day trade has some sort of guidelines to help them use it in the best way possible for whatever they're doing. So Adam is incredibly well established to do that, because he's spent the last 40 odd years studying it and doing the research. But from our side as Myndstream, it's an absolute privilege to work with people like Professor Ockelford, because you always feel like the person in the room who knows the least, which is exactly the person you should always try to be, in my opinion. So I'm very lucky to be surrounded by people like him.
Yeah. Nice. Well, good. Well, on that note, thank you so much, and thank you for bringing the professor to us today too. When I saw him, on the emails, I was like, wow, what a privilege to be doing this with the four of you today. So thank you.
Thank you for having us. Happy World Music Therapy Day, everyone, one and all. But no, thank you very much for putting this on. It's an absolute privilege to speak with you as always, and I'm so excited to continue our collaborations and partnerships. It's going to be amazing taking the audio soundtracks into as many spa locations as possible. It's going to be cool.
Yep,
absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye.